My name is Ezra Thorne, and I never thought my quiet retirement would turn into a battlefield. 72 years old, a Navy veteran, a widower. I thought I had seen the worst of life. 30 years of service in military intelligence leaves scars you can't always see. My spine was damaged by shrapnel during the Gulf, my body worn down, and after losing my wife, Martha, to cancer, well, I thought the hardest battles were behind me. I wanted peace. That's it. Just peace. That's why I bought my small house in Willow Creek Estates. The neighborhood was beautiful at first glance. Perfect lawns, picket fences, kids playing basketball in driveways, the smell of fresh-cut grass in the air. It looked like the kind of place where you could heal. I remember the day I moved in. My old Honda Civic coughed its way down the street, and some neighbors gave polite waves. I thought, yeah, this is good. This is where I can finally breathe. But there was one person who didn't wave. Her name was Vivian Blackwood, president of the HOA. She walked up to me that very first morning, clipboard in hand, heels clicking like she was inspecting a crime scene. "Oh, you must be the new resident," she said. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "We have very high standards here, Mr. Thorne. I trust you'll follow all the rules." I gave her a polite nod. "I've read the bylaws. Shouldn't be a problem." Her eyes flicked to my beat-up car, then back to me sitting stiffly in my wheelchair. She leaned in, her perfume thick and heavy. "Good, because people who don't fit in usually regret it." And just like that, she turned and walked off. I should have recognized the warning right then. For a few months, things were quiet. I stayed out of trouble. I tended to my roses. Martha loved roses, so I planted them everywhere. I'd sit outside in the evenings, the smell of blossoms carrying in the warm air, and pretend she was sitting beside me again. But my health was slipping. My back couldn't handle stairs anymore, and my doctor told me flat out, "Ezra, you need a wheelchair ramp. Otherwise, you're going to be trapped in your own home." So I did what any law-abiding man would. I hired a licensed contractor. I got the city permit, and we built the ramp. The first time I rolled down it, I almost cried from relief. Independence. Freedom. Something as simple as a wooden ramp gave me my life back. But 2 days later, Vivian showed up in my driveway like a storm cloud. She stood there, hands on her hips, sunglasses reflecting the ramp like it was toxic waste. "This is unacceptable," she snapped. I frowned. "What are you talking about? It's a city-approved structure. I have the papers right here." She waved her hand dismissively. "City rules don't matter in Willow Creek. We have community standards, and this," she pointed at the ramp like it was filth, "is an eyesore. It lowers property values." I gripped the armrest of my wheelchair. My voice was calm but sharp. "It's not an eyesore. It's a medical necessity. Without it, I can't even leave my house." "Maybe you should have thought about that before buying here, old man. Willow Creek isn't a nursing home." She spun on her heels and walked off, heels echoing like gunfire on the pavement. The smell of her expensive perfume lingered, choking me. That was the first real shot fired. 3 days later, I found a bright yellow envelope taped to my door. It flapped in the breeze like a warning flag. "Violation. Unauthorized structural modification. Fine, $10,000. $10,000 for the right to leave my own house. I sat there at my dining room table with the notice trembling in my hands. My wheelchair creaked as I leaned forward, staring at the words until they blurred. My chest felt tight, like someone was sitting on me. That night, I wheeled out to the porch. The ramp was bathed in silver moonlight. On the little table beside me sat Martha's photo. her laughing face framed in the wood she painted herself years ago. I whispered to her picture, "They're trying to break me, Marth, but they don't know who they're dealing with." Because here's what Vivian didn't know. I wasn't just another broken veteran living off scraps. I had spent decades in Navy intelligence, watching enemies, studying patterns, waiting for the right time to strike. And over the years after my uncle's inheritance, I had bought homes, quietly, carefully, to protect families from corporate landlords. In Willow Creek alone, I owned 214 homes, nearly a quarter of the neighborhood, but nobody knew. To them, I was just Ezra, the widower with a beat-up car and a garden full of roses, and I liked it that way. Still, I thought maybe I could reason with them, so I went to the next HOA meeting. The community center smelled like stale coffee and disinfectant. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, folding chairs scraped against the floor as neighbors shuffled in. Vivian stood at the front, hair perfect, papers stacked in neat little piles. She smiled sweetly, but her eyes were sharp. "We have a violation to address tonight. Mr. Thorne has installed an unapproved structure." I raised my hand. "It's not unapproved. It's legal, permitted, and necessary. I brought the paperwork." I held it up for everyone to see. Vivian gave a dramatic sigh. "Mr. Thorne, this isn't about legality. It's about standards. Our property values must be protected." She called for a vote. 4 hands went up in favor of the fine. Only one hand, Rosa Martinez's, rose against it. Rosa was young, maybe mid-30s, sharp-eyed, a paralegal by trade. Vivian's voice rang out. $10,000 fine, payable in 30 days. I looked around the room. Some neighbors shifted uncomfortably. One older man looked down at his shoes. No one dared speak. I didn't argue. I didn't shout. I just wheeled myself out, silent, and that silence rattled them more than anger would have. When I got home, I found 2 local police officers waiting near my driveway. Their patrol car lights glowed faintly in the dusk. "Mr. Thorne?" one asked, stepping forward. "We got a call about an unpermitted structure here." I couldn't believe it. Vivian had actually called the cops on me. "It's permitted," I said, holding out the city papers. My voice was steady, but inside anger boiled. "Here's the proof." The officer glanced over the documents, nodded, and handed them back. "Looks fine to me, sir. Sorry to bother you. Just doing our job." I could see in his eyes that he felt embarrassed, like he knew he was being used. As they left, I caught sight of Vivian standing down the street watching with her arms crossed. When our eyes met, she smiled. That smile said it all. This is just the beginning. That night, as crickets sang outside and the air conditioner hummed, I sat at my kitchen table surrounded by property deeds, HOA newsletters, and violation notices. I dialed a number I hadn't called in years. "Marcus," I said when he picked up. My voice was calm, but there was steel in it. "It's time to activate the files. All 214 properties. Yes, every single one." I paused, staring at Martha's photo on the wall. This isn't about revenge. It's about justice. And Martha would want that. I hung up, rolled to the window, and looked out at the quiet street. Porch lights glowed, sprinklers ticked in the distance, and families sat down to dinner. They had no idea what storm was coming. Neither did Vivian. Because this wasn't going to be a fine, it wasn't going to be a ramp. It was going to be war. And I was ready for it.
When I was in the Navy, they used to tell us, it's never the first shot you hear that kills you. It's the one that comes after, when you've already lost focus. That's what it felt like after the $10,000 fine. The notice was just the first shot. The real attack came later, in small, daily blows that cut deeper than a bullet ever could. The next morning, I opened my mailbox and found another envelope. Violation, mailbox 2 inches too high. Fine, $250. I stared at it in disbelief. I had measured that mailbox with a tape measure when I moved in. 2 inches? Who carries a ruler around checking people's mailboxes? I didn't have to guess. It was Vivian's nephew, Brad. She had recently made him the official HOA inspector. I often caught him skulking around, snapping photos with his phone like a cheap paparazzo. Later that day, I saw him crouched in front of my roses, snapping pictures. I rolled out onto the porch and called, "You need something, son?" He smirked. "Just doing my job, Mr. Thorne. Community standards, you know." I wanted to tell him that I'd seen scarier faces in foreign deserts than his smug little grin, but I kept quiet. I just watched as he strutted down the street like he owned it. By the end of the week, I had 3 more notices. Trash bin visible after pickup, $500. Excessive bird feeders, $350. Weeds between driveway cracks, $200. Altogether, over $1,000 in fines in just 7 days. I sat in my living room, surrounded by yellow envelopes, feeling like I was under siege. The walls seemed to close in. Every creak of my wheelchair echoed too loud. I could almost hear Vivian's laughter in the background of it all. I wasn't the only one who noticed. My next-door neighbor, an older woman named Mrs. Morgan, shuffled over one evening with tears in her eyes. She held a letter in her trembling hands. "They fined me due," she whispered, her accent thick, her voice shaky. "They say my guarded the gnomes. 15 years I have them. Now suddenly they say it is not allowed." Her ceramic gnomes had always made me smile when I passed by. Bright red hats, silly smiles, nothing offensive about them. "How much?" I asked. $500, she said, wiping her eyes. "I cannot pay. Social Security is not enough." I clenched my fists on my wheels. "They're going after you because you talked to me last week," I told her. "This isn't about gnomes." Her eyes widened. "What do we do?" I didn't have an answer. Not yet. Around this time, I noticed my neighbors changing. People who used to wave suddenly looked the other way. Parents pulled their kids closer when they saw me rolling by. Conversations died the moment I wheeled up. It was like I had become radioactive. And I knew why. Vivian was poisoning the well. I heard rumors that she was telling people I was a troublemaker, that I was endangering property values, that I was refusing to follow rules like everyone else. At the grocery store, I overheard 2 women whispering by the fruit stand. "He's the one with the ramp. You know, the veteran. Vivian says he's trying to sue the community. Can you believe it?" I gritted my teeth. It was like high school gossip, except now it carried real consequences. One afternoon, as I was tending to my roses, Rosa Martinez stopped by. She glanced around nervously before speaking, as if she expected Vivian to jump out of the bushes. "Mr. Thorne," she said softly, "I've been keeping track. What they're doing, it's illegal." I looked up at her. "Illegal how?" She leaned closer. "Selective enforcement. They're hitting you for violations they ignore on other houses. My paralegal training taught me this is against state law. If we gather enough evidence, we can fight back." I studied her face, determined, but also scared. I could see the cost of standing near me. "Why are you helping me?" I asked. She hesitated, then said, "Because my son rents one of your houses. You kept the rent low when you could have doubled it. You didn't have to. You care about people, and I can't watch them destroy you for that." Her words sunk deep into me. For the first time in weeks, I felt something warm, hope. I nodded. "Then let's document everything." But Vivian wasn't done. No, she was just getting started. One morning I wheeled out and smelled something wrong. Acrid, bitter. My roses, Martha's roses, were shriveling, their petals browning overnight. The air stung my nostrils. The HOA landscaping crew had accidentally sprayed industrial weed killer across my yard. 30 years of careful gardening destroyed in one morning. I stared at the blackened stems, my throat tightening. Those roses weren't just flowers. They were memories. Martha's laughter in the garden, her hands guiding mine, her perfume mixing with the blossoms. Gone. I gripped the armrests of my chair so hard my knuckles turned white. Vivian walked by later that day, fake sympathy painted on her face. "Oh dear," she cooed, "such a shame about your roses. But these things happen. Old infrastructure, old equipment. It happens to everyone eventually." I could see the satisfaction in her eyes. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat by the window, staring at the dead roses, listening to the distant hum of air conditioners and sprinklers. Every creak outside made me tense. Every shadow looked like a threat. I wasn't paranoid. I was under attack. The next blow came when I found 2 local police officers at my door again. "Mr. Thorne," one said awkwardly, "we've had a complaint about unsafe conditions on your property." "Unsafe?" I asked. "Unsafe how?" He shifted uncomfortably. "The report says your ramp is a hazard, might collapse, might injure someone." I let out a bitter laugh and handed him the contractor's paperwork. "It's new, structurally sound, city approved." The officer nodded, embarrassed. "Yeah, looks fine to me, sir. Sorry." As they left, one leaned closer and whispered, "You've got someone powerful gunning for you. Watch your back." I watched their patrol car drive off, my heart heavy. The local police couldn't protect me. They were stuck in the middle, and Vivian knew how to use that. The harassment didn't stop there. My cable went out one day, cut by accident, while utility workers did repairs. My sprinkler system malfunctioned, flooding my driveway. A heavy branch from a tree service accidentally crushed the hood of my Civic. Each time there was an excuse. Each time Vivian was there with her crocodile smile, saying, "These things happen." But they weren't accidents. They were warnings. I could feel it in my bones, the same way I used to feel enemy movement in foreign deserts before the ambush hit. This was psychological warfare, death by 1,000 cuts. And I knew one thing for sure: if I didn't fight back, they'd bury me alive. By the end of that month, my total fines were over $3,500. And then Rosa knocked on my door, holding another violation notice in her shaking hands. "They fined my son's basketball hoop," she whispered. "Approved years ago. Now suddenly it's a problem. $2,000. I stared at the paper, my gut sinking. "It's not just me anymore," I said slowly. "They're going after anyone who stands near me." Rosa's eyes filled with fear. "What do we do?" I looked out at the quiet street, the glow of porch lights, the shadows stretching across perfect lawns, and I felt something shift inside me. "We don't fight their way," I told her. "We fight smart. We gather, we document, we prepare." I turned back to her, my voice steady. "Because this isn't just harassment anymore, Rosa. This is war." Silence can be comforting. Silence can be deadly. I learned that in the Navy. You sit in silence long enough, you hear everything the enemy doesn't want you to. The shuffle of boots in sand, the click of a safety being switched off, the low hum of a generator miles away. Silence tells stories, if you're patient. That's how I started treating my days after Vivian declared war on me. Every notice, every fine, every accident wasn't just harassment. It was information, patterns, evidence. If they thought they were wearing me down, they were wrong. I'd spent 30 years in intelligence. My patience was stronger than their cruelty. One night, I sat by the window in the dark, notebook in hand, recording times and dates. At 9:12 p.m., security patrol rolled slowly past my house, headlights lingering. At 10:04 p.m., a car stopped outside, engine idling for 5 minutes before moving on. At 2:37 a.m., motion sensor lights blazed across my windows, flooding my bedroom with harsh white beams. It wasn't random. It was planned. Harassment disguised as routine checks. I wrote it all down. My handwriting was shaky, but each page became another weapon. Rosa came by one morning, her eyes tired. She glanced over her shoulder before stepping inside. They followed me home last night, a black SUV, no plates, stayed behind me the whole way. I felt a chill run down my spine. They're expanding targets, I muttered, trying to isolate me by scaring anyone who stands near me. She swallowed hard. Ezra, they're trying to break you, and maybe me too. I reached across the table, laying a hand gently on hers. Rosa, I've been broken before, shot at, bombed, interrogated. This is noise, but noise leaves traces, and those traces will destroy them. Her eyes filled with tears, but she nodded. Then let me help you, please. I can organize the files, cross-check dates. I know legal language. They can't twist it if it's documented. And just like that, I had an ally. But the harassment kept escalating. One morning, I opened my front door to find a notice plastered across it. Unsafe occupant. Potential eviction pending investigation. I called the number listed at the bottom, the county's Adult Protective Services. Yes, sir, the woman on the phone said politely. We received an anonymous tip claiming you're unable to care for yourself safely. I laughed bitterly. Do I sound unsafe to you? There was a pause. Sir, we still have to conduct a home visit. When the investigator arrived, I welcomed her in. She walked through my house, clipboard in hand, checking for signs of neglect. My house was spotless, dishes clean, bills paid, medicine organized. At the end, she looked embarrassed. Mr. Thorne, forgive me. You're perfectly capable. This referral was unnecessary. I wheeled her out, smiling thinly. Don't worry, ma'am. I know exactly who called you. From the corner of my eye, I saw Vivian's BMW parked down the street. She was watching, always watching. The neighborhood changed too. Kids no longer played in the cul-de-sac. Parents pulled curtains tight. People were living under a shadow they didn't dare name out loud. And still, envelopes filled my mailbox. Violation. Lawn too dry, $150. Violation. Ramp paint not matching trim, $400. Violation. Trash can visible, $500. I stacked them in neat piles, logging each one in my notebook. My dining room became a war desk, yellow notices, photographs, timestamps. But I never once paid a fine. One evening, the police showed up again. Same 2 officers, as before. They looked uncomfortable just stepping onto my porch. Mr. Thorne, one began, we got a noise complaint. Noise? I asked, raising an eyebrow.
I've been sitting here reading since dinner." The other officer shifted. "The report said you've been running power tools late at night?" I rolled back, gesturing at my quiet living room. "Do you see any power tools here? Unless books got louder since yesterday, I think you've been misinformed." The officers exchanged a look, clearly aware this was bogus. One sighed. "Look, sir, we have to respond to every call. But unofficially, you've got someone who doesn't want you here." I leaned forward in my chair. "I know exactly who it is, and I'm not going anywhere." As they left, one turned back and whispered, "Be careful." The fear wasn't mine. It was everyone else's. One neighbor, Tom Kowalski, a Vietnam vet, stopped me at the mailbox. His voice was low, urgent. "Ezra, they came after me too. Said my memorial oak tree is a hazard. That tree was planted for my son. He died in Iraq. They want it cut down or pay $2,000. I stared at him, anger rising. "They're desecrating memorials now?" His eyes were wet. "I can't fight them alone." I put a hand on his shoulder. "You won't. None of us will." That night, I added Tom's violation notice to my growing collection. Evidence was stacking up. Rosa came again with a folder. "Ezra, listen to this," she said, flipping pages. "I pulled public records. The HOA's legal budget tripled in the last year. They're funneling money to consulting firms owned by board members' relatives. This isn't just harassment, it's theft." I whistled softly. "They're bleeding the neighborhood dry while terrorizing anyone who questions them." She nodded. "And the worst part? Nobody talks. They're too scared." I leaned back, staring at the ceiling. The hum of my air conditioner filled the silence. "We'll be the ones who talk, but not yet. First, we make their silence into evidence." The nights got worse. Security patrols idled outside my house, walkie-talkies crackling. Floodlights flared every 30 minutes, jolting me awake. My wheelchair creaked as I rolled from window to window, documenting each intrusion with my camera. One night, at 3 a.m., I heard gravel crunching outside. I peered through the blinds and saw Brad, Vivian's nephew, taking photos of my ramp. He crouched low, flashlight in hand, whispering into his phone. I opened the door. "Brad!" I barked. He jumped like I'd fired a gun. "Late night for inspections, huh?" I said, my voice sharp. He stammered, "Just doing my job?" "Your job," I growled, "is going to land you in court one day. Hope Vivian pays you enough to cover the lawyer bills." He hurried off into the dark, his footsteps fading. I closed the door, my heart pounding, not from fear, but from adrenaline. Because I realized something in that moment. They thought they were watching me, but I was watching them. By the end of the 3rd month, I had filled 2 binders with evidence, dates, photographs, audio recordings, even video from small cameras I'd hidden around my property. Every accident, every bogus fine, every police call, it was all logged. I wasn't reacting anymore. I was preparing. The silence of my house wasn't suffocating now. It was comforting. The silence was mine, my fortress, my weapon. One night, as Rosa sorted papers across my dining table, she looked up at me. "You're building a case, aren't you?" I gave her a slow smile. "Not just a case, Rosa, a war file." Her brow furrowed. "Against Vivian?" "Against all of them," I said. "Every board member, every corrupt contractor, every coward hiding behind her perfume. I've fought terrorists with fewer resources. These people have no idea who they're playing with." Her eyes widened, both in fear and awe. And I meant every word. Because I wasn't just surviving their harassment. I was laying the trap.
And when it finally snapped shut, Vivian Blackwood would never see it come. If Chapter 3 of my life was silence, then Chapter 4 was noise. Not the kind of noise you hear once and forget. The kind that crawls under your skin, shakes your nerves, and makes every breath feel heavier. Vivian and her board had tested me with fines, with notices, with gossip, but now they decided to turn the screws harder. And that's when things got ugly. It started on a Monday morning. I rolled outside to find my Honda Civic, the same one I'd driven since 2008, sitting crooked in the driveway. The windshield was spiderwebbed, the hood dented deep. A tree limb lay across it, still fresh with sap. A city-contracted tree service truck was parked nearby. Two men in uniforms leaned on shovels, smoking cigarettes. "What the hell happened?" I called out. One man shrugged, blowing smoke into the air. "Branch came down. Accident." "Accident?" I wheeled closer, anger boiling in my ears. "That branch was 20 feet from my car yesterday. You cut it, didn't you?" The second man smirked. "Hey, trees fall. Not our fault where they land." I stared at the crushed hood, my blood pounding in my ears. My car wasn't just metal, it was freedom. My way to appointments, groceries, the little independence I had left. Vivian's white BMW rolled by slow. She lowered her sunglasses, gave me a smile, and drove off without a word. I didn't need her words. I knew. That was no accident. The very next day, my internet and cable went out. I called the company. "Strange," the tech said, scratching his head. "Looks like someone cut the line. Clean slice." "Cut?" I repeated. He nodded. "Yeah. Doesn't happen naturally. Someone wanted you offline." I thanked him, but my gut twisted. They weren't just hitting me physically, they were trying to cut me off, isolate me. That night, my phone buzzed with a text from Rosa. "Be careful. They're asking questions about me at work." My chest tightened. They weren't just coming for me anymore. They were reaching for anyone who stood too close. Wednesday came with a new humiliation. I woke to the sound of water rushing. My driveway was flooded ankle deep, water spilling into the street. My sprinkler system, untouched the night before, was now gushing nonstop. I called the city water department. A worker arrived, checked the system, then frowned. "Sir, this wasn't a malfunction. Someone tampered with the controls." I closed my eyes, breathing through my nose. "Let me guess. No cameras, no proof." He shrugged helplessly. "Sorry, sir. Nothing we can do." Nothing they could do. But I could. I wheeled back inside, grabbed my notebook, and logged every detail. Date, time, witness, statement. Every attack wasn't just pain anymore. It was ammunition. Still, the toll was real. At night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, the hum of my air conditioner sounding like distant engines from old battlefields. My chest ached from stress. My roses were gone, my car wrecked, my driveway flooded. And yet, I couldn't break. Because in my mind, I could hear Martha's voice. "Promise me you'll help people who can't help themselves, Ezra." And I wasn't about to fail her. Friday night, there was a knock at my door. I opened it to find two police officers again, different ones this time. "Mr. Thorne," the taller one asked. "Yes?" "We got a report of suspected rodent infestation on your property." I almost laughed. "Rodents? Are you kidding me?" He cleared his throat. "We have to check, sir." I let them in. They poked around, checking corners, shining flashlights under cabinets. My house was spotless, not a crumb, not a droplet. Finally, the shorter officer sighed. "Sorry, sir, nothing here." I followed them to the door. "Let me guess," I said flatly. "Anonymous complaint?" They exchanged a look. The taller one gave a reluctant nod. "Anonymous," I repeated, bitterness in my throat. "Anonymous always has a name in this neighborhood.
and her name is Vivian Blackwood." The officers shifted uncomfortably. "We can't confirm that, sir, but off the record, stay sharp. You're being targeted." I watched their patrol car pull away, the red and blue lights fading into the night. Targeted. That word sat heavy in my gut. This wasn't about rules anymore. This was a campaign. Later that week, Rosa stormed into my house, her face pale. "They fined me, Ezra. $2,000 for my son's basketball hoop, approved years ago. They just changed their minds." I set my jaw. "Because you're helping me." Her hands shook as she dropped the notice on my table. "They're trying to scare me off, but I'm not leaving you alone." I admired her courage, but I hated that she was paying for it. I leaned forward. "Listen to me, Rosa. This isn't harassment anymore. It's coordinated, it's organized, and organized harassment is a crime." Her eyes widened. "What are you saying?" I tapped the binders of evidence on my table. "I'm saying we're not just fighting a petty HOA anymore. We're fighting a criminal enterprise. And enterprises like that, they fall hard." The harassment turned psychological. One night, motion sensor lights outside flared every 20 minutes, like clockwork. At 3 a.m., I heard static crackle from a patrol car idling outside. The voices over the radio weren't talking about anything urgent. They were just there, keeping me awake. Sleep deprivation. Classic tactic. Another night, I heard gravel crunching at 2:15 a.m. I peered through the blinds and saw shadows moving by my fence. Low voices, laughter. A rock hit my ramp, clattering loud in the night. I gripped the phone, ready to call police, but then, silence. The next morning, a violation notice waited in my mailbox. "Unauthorized ramp materials, $500. They were taunting me now. The weight grew heavier each day. My hands trembled more. My chest felt tighter more often. And yet my mind was sharper than ever. I had binders stacked high with evidence. Photos of Vivian's fence violating setback rules. Pictures of the treasurer's unpermitted deck. Notes on the secretary's illegal home business. Every time they hit me, I hit back. Quietly. With proof. I wasn't fighting fire with fire. I was fighting lies with truth. One evening, Rosa sat across from me, papers spread out between us. She rubbed her temples. "Ezra, how do you stay so calm? I'm falling apart. I can't sleep. I keep looking over my shoulder." I smiled faintly. "Calm? Rosa, I'm not calm. I'm furious. But anger gets you killed in a fight. Patience keeps you alive." She looked at me with something close to awe. You're building a case, aren't you? Not just for yourself, but for everyone." I nodded slowly. "That's right. Because this isn't about Ezra Thorne anymore. It's about every neighbor too scared to speak. Every widow, every veteran, every family they've bled dry." I leaned forward, my voice low but steady. "When the time comes, Rosa, we're not just going to win, we're going to expose them for what they are." Her lips parted. "And what are they?" I met her gaze, steel in my eyes. "Criminals. And criminals eventually meet justice." That night, as I wheeled back to my window, I stared out at the quiet street. The porch lights, the still trees, the shadows stretching across manicured lawns. To anyone else, it looked peaceful. But I knew better. It was a battlefield, and the enemy was getting sloppy.
When you fight a war long enough, you start to notice patterns. You learn to listen for the cracks, the places where the enemy isn't as strong as they pretend to be. And in Willow Creek, I was finally hearing those cracks. It began with Rosa. She showed up one evening, clutching a thick envelope of papers. Her eyes were wide, a mix of fear and excitement. "Ezra," she whispered, glancing over her shoulder before stepping inside. "You need to see this." I wheeled back from the table to let her spread the papers out. Bank statements, legal budgets, invoices. She tapped one page with her finger. "Look at this. The HOA's legal spending went from $30,000 a year to over $100,000. And where's the money going? Consulting firms. 3 of them. Guess who owns them?" I leaned forward, scanning the names. My lips curled into a bitter smile. Blackwood, and let me guess, Martinez. She nodded grimly. Derek Blackwood, Vivian's husband, and the treasurer's cousin. They're billing the HOA for work that doesn't exist. I whistled low. They're not just bullies, they're thieves. Rosa's hands trembled as she stacked the papers. "If we prove this, it's fraud, criminal fraud." I met her eyes. "Then we will prove it. Carefully, thoroughly, no mistakes." Word spreads faster in a community than wildfire. One by one, neighbors started finding excuses to talk to me, quietly, privately, always looking over their shoulders. First was Mrs. Morgan, the woman with the garden gnomes. She caught me at the mailbox, clutching a violation notice. "They fined me again," she whispered. $200. They say my curtains are wrong color." "Curtains, Ezra!" Her eyes filled with tears. "They want me gone, but I cannot move. This is my home." I placed a hand over hers. "You won't move, not until we're finished." Then Tom Kowalski came back, his face tight with grief. "They cut it down," he said hoarsely. "My son's tree. They came while I was at work, said it was unsafe. No warning, no appeal, just gone." His voice broke. "That tree was all I had left of him." I felt my stomach twist. That wasn't enforcement, that was cruelty. I looked him in the eye. "Tom, listen to me. They think they're untouchable, but they're not. We're going to make sure of it." Even the police were starting to notice. One afternoon, Officer Jenkins, the taller of the two who had visited me before, stopped by. No sirens, no lights, just him. "Mr. Thorne, off the record, we're getting a lot of calls about you. Too many, and most of them are nonsense." I tilted my head. "Anonymous complaints?" He nodded. "Every time. Noise, rodents, unsafe structure, even fire hazards. None of it checks out." I muttered, "Vivian." He gave me a long look. "We can't prove that, but if you've got documentation, real evidence, the department might take a closer look." I wheeled him to my dining table. His eyes widened at the binders stacked high. Photos, dates, violations, witness notes. "This is more organized than some of our case files," he admitted. I smirked. 30 years of intelligence work, officer. I know how to build a war file." He lowered his voice. "Keep going. When the time comes, you'll want everything airtight. Believe me." And with that, he left. It was the first time I felt the police weren't just pawns. They were beginning to see the truth. But Vivian wasn't slowing down. One morning I found a letter in my mailbox. Notice of foreclosure proceedings. My breath caught. This was the big move, the nuclear option. If I didn't pay their mountain of bogus fines, they were threatening to take my home. I sat at the table staring at the letter, my hands shaking. Then slowly, the fear gave way to something else, satisfaction. Because foreclosure required documentation, legal filings, evidence. And the more they filed, the deeper they dug their own grave. I folded the letter neatly and slid it into my binder. Another weapon added to the arsenal. That night, Rosa joined me at the table. She looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes. "They're targeting me harder now," she admitted. "Extra inspections, anonymous complaints at work, even my son's friends are being questioned." I studied her. "You can step away, Rosa. No one will blame you." Her eyes flashed. "No, they want me scared. They want me silent. That's why I won't back down." I felt a surge of respect. "Then you're braver than most soldiers I've met." She smiled faintly, but it faded quick. "Ezra, how do you do it? How do you keep going without breaking?" I leaned back, staring at Martha's photo on the wall. "Because I already promised someone I wouldn't." Her brows furrowed. "Martha?" I nodded. "On her deathbed, she told me, 'Help people who can't help themselves.' That's what keeps me steady. Every fine, every attack, it's not just about me. It's about keeping that promise." Her eyes glistened. "Then let's keep it together." The cracks in Vivian's armor widened when another neighbor, Mr. Patel, showed up at my door. He was shaking, clutching a stack of notices. "They fined me for parking my daughter's car on the street," he said breathlessly. "But 3 board members do the same thing every week. No fines, nothing." Selective enforcement, clear as day. I photographed his notices, logged the dates. "Thank you," I told him. "You've just added another bullet to our case." He blinked. "Case?" I smiled faintly. "You'll see." The neighborhood whispers grew louder. People were starting to notice the double standards. Vivian's allies were still loud, still smug, but the fear was cracking. At the next HOA meeting, I wheeled into the community center. The air smelled of coffee and disinfectant, as always, but the energy felt different. Vivian strutted to the podium, hair perfect, voice dripping sugar. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are here to discuss ongoing enforcement issues. Certain residents continue to disregard our community's rules." All eyes flicked to me. I sat calm, silent, binder in my lap. Then Rosa stood. Her voice was steady, firm. "Mrs. Blackwood, can you explain why board members have unapproved structures, illegal fences, and home businesses, yet face no fines, while others receive thousands in penalties for smaller issues?" A ripple ran through the room, whispers, nervous glances. Vivian's smile faltered for half a second. Then she snapped, "That's inappropriate speculation. We're here to protect property values, not entertain conspiracy theories." But the damage was done. People had heard. People were thinking. And once people start questioning, fear loses its grip. That night, Rosa sat with me again, adrenaline still high. "She almost broke," she said. "Did you see her face?" I nodded. The mask slipped, and once it slips, it never goes back the same way. She leaned forward. "Ezra, you're planning something bigger, aren't you?" I hesitated, then gave her a small smile. "Let's just say, Vivian thinks she's the hunter, but she doesn't realize she's already in the trap." Her eyes widened. "Trap?" I tapped the binder. "Every notice, every lie, every fraudulent dollar. When the time is right, Rosa, the whole world will see what they've been hiding." I wheeled to the window, staring out at the quiet street. The night was still, too still. Cracks are forming, and soon this whole facade will collapse. You can push a man only so far before the tide turns. Vivian had pushed me for months. Every fine, every accident, every sleepless night. What she didn't know was that every attack was feeding something larger, a file so thick it could crush her little empire in one swing. And that swing was coming. It started with Officer Jenkins again. He showed up one afternoon, plain clothes this time, no patrol car, no uniform. He stood at my door, hands in his pockets, eyes darting left and right. "Mr. Thorne," he said quietly, "you've been busy." I wheeled back, letting him inside. "Define busy." He glanced at the binders stacked high on my dining table. "Busy building a case strong enough to make our department nervous. I shared some of this with a buddy of mine at the bureau. He wants to talk." My chest tightened. "The FBI?" Jenkins nodded. "They take organized fraud and harassment seriously. If half of what you've got is true, you're looking at federal crimes." I smiled grimly. "It's all true, and I've got more." 2 weeks later, a man in a dark suit knocked at my door. He introduced himself as Agent Collins, FBI. His voice was low, steady, the kind of voice that didn't waste words. "Mr. Thorne," he said, "Jenkins gave me a preview of your files. I need to see everything." I wheeled him to the table. He spent 2 hours flipping through binders, scribbling notes. Photos, notices, fraudulent invoices Rosa uncovered, witness statements from neighbors, even video of Brad sneaking around at 3 a.m. Finally, he closed the last binder and leaned back. "Mr. Thorne, this isn't just harassment. This is racketeering, fraud, conspiracy. We can move on this." My hands gripped the wheels of my chair. "What do you need from me?" He studied me a long moment. "Patience and a little performance." The plan was simple, on paper at least. Let Vivian and her board dig themselves deeper. Make one last push to crush me. Meanwhile, the Bureau wired the community center for sound, set up hidden cameras, and had undercover agents posing as residents. The stage was set for the next HOA meeting. The night of the meeting, I dressed deliberately. Navy blazer, clean shirt, Martha's wedding band hanging from a chain around my neck. I wanted Vivian to see me steady, unbroken. When I wheeled into the community center, the air buzzed with tension. Folding chairs scraped against the floor. Neighbors murmured nervously. Vivian stood at the podium, perfume thick, pearls gleaming under the fluorescent lights. She smirked as she saw me roll to the front. "Ah, Mr. Thorne," she purred. "Always punctual. Shall we begin?" I kept my face blank, though inside my pulse thundered. The meeting dragged through minor agenda items until Vivian's voice sharpened. "Next, the issue of delinquent residents refusing to comply with community standards." She locked eyes on me. "Specifically, Mr. Ezra Thorne, who owes this association over $30,000 in unpaid fines." Gasps rippled through the room. I said nothing. I just opened my binder and placed it on my lap. Vivian continued, voice rising, righteous fury dripping from every word. "This man's negligence threatens property values. His arrogance endangers our harmony. Tonight, this board moves to authorize foreclosure proceedings." She slammed her gavel. "Effective immediately." Chaos erupted. Neighbors whispered, some in shock, others nodding in fear. I raised my hand slowly. "Madam President," I said calmly, "before you rush to steal my home, perhaps the board should disclose how much money you've stolen from the community." The room went silent. Vivian's smile faltered. "Excuse me?" I wheeled forward, voice steady. 3 consulting firms, no real services, over $70,000 siphoned into your family's pockets." Rosa stood then, holding up copies of the invoices. "Here are the records, cross-checked with county filings. It's fraud." Whispers turned into shouts. "Fraud? Is this true?" Vivian's face flushed red. "Lies! Baseless accusations from a bitter old man and his little sidekick." Agent Collins, disguised in the back as just another resident, raised his hand. His voice carried. "Then you won't mind if federal auditors review your records." Vivian froze. For the first time, real fear flashed in her eyes. Then everything happened at once. Men in suits stood from the back row. Badges flashed. Federal Bureau of Investigation. Everyone remained seated. Neighbors gasped. Some stood, then quickly sat again. Board members went pale. The treasurer dropped his pen, handshaking. The secretary cursed. Vivian fought hardest, thrashing, shouting, "You'll regret this, Thorne! You all regret this!" I sat there in my chair, calm as stone, watching the empire crumble. When the last board member was let out, Agent Collins approached me. His voice was quiet, respectful. "Mr. Thorne, you just saved this community." I exhaled. A weight I hadn't realized I'd been carrying finally lifting. "No," I murmured. "We all did. Rosa, Tom, Mrs. Morgan, every neighbor who spoke up. I just made it was heard." He nodded. "You'll need to testify, of course, but with this evidence, they don't stand a chance." I glanced around the room. Neighbors whispered, stunned, but there was something new in their eyes. Not fear, not pity, hope. And for the first time in months, I felt it too. That night, as I wheeled home under the quiet stars, I passed Vivian's BMW sitting abandoned in the driveway, lights still on. For years, she had ruled this neighborhood with fear. But fear had a short life. Truth lived longer. And justice? Justice was just beginning. The night they took Vivian away, I thought I'd sleep soundly for the first time in months. But when I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling fan, I realized something. The battle was over, but the war wasn't done. Justice moves slower than fear. 2 weeks later, I was summoned downtown to the federal courthouse. The air smelled of polished marble and stale coffee. Rosa walked beside me, her hand on my shoulder as we passed through security. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with tension. Vivian sat at the defense table, still perfectly dressed, her hair shining under the fluorescent lights. But the fire in her eyes was gone. What remained was bitterness, cold, heavy, desperate. She caught my gaze and smirked faintly, as if to say, "This isn't over." I looked right back, steady as stone. "Yes, it is." The prosecutor laid out the case piece by piece. Fraudulent invoices, bank transfers, selective enforcement, harassment campaigns. My binders became exhibits, my photographs projected on a giant screen for the jury to see. When it was my turn to testify, I wheeled to the stand, adjusted the microphone, and took a deep breath. "Mr. Thorne," the prosecutor began, "why didn't you just move away when the harassment started?" I looked at the jury, their eyes fixed on me. "Because this is my home. Because my wife Martha planted roses in that yard. Because my neighbors deserve better than to be ruled by fear. And because sometimes the only way to beat a bully is to stand your ground until the truth comes out." The courtroom was silent. You could have heard a pin drop. Cross-examination was a storm. Vivian's lawyer tried to paint me as bitter, vengeful, exaggerating. "You're saying every accident, every complaint was intentional? Isn't that a little paranoid?" I smiled faintly. "Paranoia is when you think they're out to get you without evidence. I had evidence." I pointed at the binder stacked on the table. Hundreds of pages, dates, times, photographs. If that's paranoia, then I suggest you look up the definition again. A few jurors smiled. Even the judge's lips twitched. The trial lasted 3 weeks. Witness after witness came forward. Mrs. Morgan with her gnome finds, Tom with his destroyed memorial tree, Mr. Patel with his bogus parking violations. One by one, the community spoke. Fear gave way to courage. By the end, the jury had no doubts. Guilty on all counts: fraud, racketeering, conspiracy, harassment. Vivian and her board were sentenced to long prison terms. Restitution was ordered, money stolen from the community, to be paid back in full. When the verdict was read, I didn't cheer, I didn't gloat. I just closed my eyes and whispered Martha's name. In the months that followed, the neighborhood began to heal. Children played in the cul-de-sac again. Curtains stayed open. Neighbors waved. The shadows that had haunted every corner seemed to lift. Rosa became president of the new HOA board, one built on transparency and fairness. The first thing she did was tear up the foreclosure notices and wipe out every bogus fine. Mrs. Morgan got to keep her gnomes. Tom planted a new oak tree, and this time the whole neighborhood came out to help. Even the police stopped by, smiling, watching kids play basketball in Rosa's driveway. It was like the whole community was breathing again after being suffocated for years. For me, life slowed down. My Civic was gone, my roses were dead, but I had peace. And peace is worth more than any car or flower. One evening, Rosa joined me on the porch. We sat in the golden light, the air warm with the smell of barbecue drifting from a neighbor's grill. "You did it," she said softly. "You kept your promise to Martha." I stared at the horizon, the sky painted in orange and purple. "No, Rosa, we did it. This was never just my fight." She smiled. "Still, it started with you refusing to bow." I sipped my coffee, the steam curling into the twilight. Sometimes, that's all it takes, one person refusing to bend. Months later, I received a letter from Washington, D.C. The Ezra Thorne Community Protection Act had passed, federal legislation aimed at preventing HOAs from abusing power, guaranteeing rights for residents, and outlawing selective enforcement. I sat at my table, the letter trembling in my hands, tears blurring my vision. Martha's promise wasn't just kept, it was written into law. I whispered to the empty room, "We did it, Martha. We really did it." Looking back now, I don't remember every notice, every sleepless night, every insult hurled my way. What I remember is Rosa's courage, Tom's grief turning to strength, Mrs. Morgan's tears turning into laughter when she set her gnomes back on the lawn. That's what matters. Fear can rule for a while, but it can't rule forever. Because truth waits, patience waits, justice waits. And when it comes hard. So if you're listening to this, wondering if you should fight back when someone abuses their power, remember my story. Remember that one man in a wheelchair, armed with nothing but binders, patience, and a promise, brought down an empire of bullies. I'm not special. I'm not a hero. I'm just a man who refused to be silent. And if I could do it, you can too.